South Carolina, of course, where the Democratic presidential primary is here tomorrow. You guys are all ready to vote, I'm sure. We got a lot coming up tonight, including an interview with Senator Elizabeth Warren. She'll be talking to me tonight. But the big story today, once again, of course, is the growing coronavirus. Wall Street closed down big again today, which makes it actually the worst week since the financial crisis in 2008. And it is just becoming abundantly clear every day how dangerous it is to have an incompetent administration leading us through a major crisis. I mean, it's worth taking just a second to look, sort of walk back and walk through the facts about how this administration has handled this crisis so far, right? First, the administration had officials who overrode the advice of the Centers for Disease Control, and they chose to bring back a bunch of infected Americans from a cruise ship on the same plane as non-infected Americans. The CDC, who are, of course, the experts in this, said, don't do that. And the Trump administration officials did it anyway. And that was the first in a series of decisions just showing how out of their depth they've been. Right? So you've got the folks from the cruise ship back in the U.S., and then they have this other population that had come back from Wuhan, right? These are Americans who have been brought back correctly, right, from the epicenter of the disease in Wuhan, China. And we now know, thanks to a whistleblower complaint, that the government workers sent to deal with those Americans, the ones brought back from Wuhan, were dangerously unprepared. Quoting from the Times article, without proper training or equipment, some of the exposed staff members moved around freely on and off the Air Force bases where the quarantines were happening, including one person staying in a nearby hotel and leaving California on a commercial flight. According to the same complaint, which is from a senior leader in the Department of Health and Human Services, officials were not provided safety protocol training until 5 days into their assignment. And it was so disconcerting to these frontline workers who've been sent in to treat these quarantined Americans that the whistleblower says their phone was ringing off the hook with panic calls. And this was happening on an Air Force bases where the U.S. government was quarantining the sick Americans. And one of those bases was Travis Air Force Base, which is in Northern California. So then we got news 2 days ago that the first instance of what's called community transfer had happened with the virus, right? A new patient tested positive for coronavirus who had not traveled to any of the infected areas. So the origin of how that person got the virus was unknown. But it just so happens that she lives in the same county as Travis Air Force Base. In fact, she was first treated at a hospital 15 minutes from Travis Air Force Base. Just a string of decisions that show really incredible incompetence on the part of this administration. And along the way, of course, as the virus has grown, chiefly globally, right, outside the U.S., at every instance, they have chosen that instead of being transparent and factual and clear, they've gone for a kind of combination of happy talk and wrong information. They've repeatedly been contradicting their own experts in the government. The president said there's going to be a vaccine in a short while. Experts say, no, that's not true. It'll be at least a year. The president says it's exactly like the flu. That's not true. Right now, the mortality rates for this virus, coronavirus, are anywhere from 10 to 20 times what the flu is. He said there are only 15 cases in the U.S. He keeps repeating this, but that's just not the number. There are 62. The numbers are what the numbers are. He says it will disappear like a miracle and the cases will probably go to zero. That's not what the CDC expects. It's just... And tonight we have news that, guess what? There's another case in California. In Santa Clara County, another case of community transfer, right? So there's a second case where we don't know where the virus came from. And experts say this probably means there are 2 population centers and probably a lot more cases in the U.S., which is not surprising. This is what the CDC told us to expect. The White House is now muzzling their own experts, taking control of the message. Everything now has to be run through the office of the Vice President, Mike Pence. Right. Well, here's the thing about this, right? When you have any kind of public health emergency, any kind of epidemic, what you want is the science leading the politics, not the politics leading the science. And this is so crucial because when you do not get that, you literally get people killed. And here's the thing. We've already seen that happen with this very outbreak, right? The reason epidemiologists say the coronavirus spread so rapidly in the first place in China was precisely because the Chinese government attempted to keep a lid on the information about it. They didn't want people to know the virus was happening. Today we found out in Iran, there's a source that told the BBC, Iran's death toll is not 40, which is what their official statistics say, it's 210, right? And that suggests we're dealing with a virus infection rate that's 5 times what they've been willing to admit. And that denial costs people their lives, right? If you keep the information away from people, they can't prepare. Right now in the US, the biggest obstacle that we face is just a testing shortage. The first thing we have to do is figure out the scope of the problem, and right now we do not have the tests to do that. In this country, we've only tested around 460 people. As of today, all right, to put that number in context, South Korea has run more than 35,000 tests, right? They're testing at massive scale, and the tests the CDC developed have been defective. The labs running the tests are not confident in the results. So now, for example, the state of New York is going to make its own coronavirus test. And while all of this is happening, the coronavirus point person, the guy who's supposed to be running it all, Vice President Mike Pence, spent last night hosting a $25,000 a plate fundraiser in Florida for congressional Republicans. He followed that with an interview this morning with right-wing conspiracy theorist Rush Limbaugh, a guy who claimed the coronavirus is like the common cold. President, for his part, Donald Trump, yesterday he had a 45-minute meeting with 2 actors who are working on a deep state right-wing play. The interesting detail about that is that it was scheduled for 15 minutes, but he just really wanted it to go longer. So they were ready to be in and out in 15, but the president just wanted to talk to them longer, so it was 45. That's where the priorities of the administration are, right? And at times like this, you need leadership at the top. You need someone to deal with the facts as they are. And I have to say, having been in this very position, right, hosting a cable news show during the Ebola epidemic, that was in some ways scarier because of just how deadly the virus was, but it was also far less of a threat directly to the U.S. because it was not as communicable. During that period, Donald Trump and the right-wing media was engaged in the most hysterical, irresponsible, demagogic frenzy of panic and fear-mongering. And I don't want to do that with the coronavirus, right? Like, I take this job seriously. I take the platform seriously. It can be managed. This can be managed. There's no reason for panic, right? It could get pretty bad. It could. It could spread fairly far. But there's a huge spectrum of possibility, both in terms of infection rates and mortality and treatment. A lot of it depends on what people in charge do and what you do, like wash your hands. No, seriously. But the core principle for any of us that have a platform, and this should be up to and including the President of the United States, is just to be transparent and clear about what the science says, what the risks might be. And right now, that basic threshold is just not being met.